What would you do if the most dangerous moment of your life didn't happen to you, but to someone you love more than anything? Imagine the unthinkable: three men storming in, dragging a child out of sight, and nobody knows where she is. Not the police, not her friends, not even the streets she has walked every day of her life. Today we're diving deep into a moment so shocking, so intense, it changed everything for a powerful man whose name alone once ruled the streets. And in this video you'll learn exactly what happened, how her father reacted, and the lessons hidden inside this dramatic real-life story that most people never talk about. This isn't just another true crime retelling. This is a story about fear and power, influence and vulnerability, and what it really means when your loved ones become targets. You're about to discover how a moment of terror rocked an entire community, and how one man's response revealed something deeper about strength, loyalty, and consequences. Picture a neighborhood where respect is earned by action, not by words, where alliances are fragile, and danger hides in plain sight. This was the world our central figure lived in, a place where reputation could protect you, but not always the ones you love. Until one day, everything changed. Three strangers appeared. They knew exactly what they were doing. In broad daylight they grabbed the one person this man would give his life to protect, his own daughter. They dragged her out of safety, and into uncertainty. Nobody expected it. Nobody saw it coming. In the blink of an eye, a family was shattered, and a legendary figure was forced into a race against time. What followed wasn't a search led by fear, nor was it a plea for mercy. What happened next was a calculated storm, a response that would reveal the true heart of a man who seemed untouchable, yet found himself facing the most personal crisis of his life. You will witness the transformation from protector to hunter, from fear to fierce resolve. You will hear how rumors spread faster than truth, how allies became informants, and how the streets reacted when they realized this wasn't just another crime. This was a direct challenge to a world built on respect, fear, and influence. And you'll learn something most people never understand about how people with power handle loss. By the end of this video you'll know exactly how this dramatic rescue unfolded. You'll understand why this incident became a defining moment. And most importantly, you'll discover the timeless lessons hidden beneath the surface, about courage, about consequences, and about how far a parent will go to protect their child. So stay with me, don't click away, because what you are about to hear goes beyond headlines. It goes into the heart of what it really means to confront the darkest hours of life with strength and purpose. What happened next will shock you, but the reason it matters will change the way you see power forever. Before we talk about the dramatic moment that shook the streets, we need to understand the world this man came from, and why his family was never truly safe. Long before his daughter became the center of one of the most intense moments in Harlem's history, he was already a figure known across the neighborhood, feared, respected, and impossible to ignore. Born into a world of hardship in the early 1900s, he didn't grow up with privilege or protection. From a young age he learned the harsh realities of life in America, especially as a black man facing constant danger and discrimination. As he got older, his path didn't lead him toward peace or obscurity. Instead he found himself drawn into the underworld of Harlem, where power was earned through strength and influence, not through law or conventional success. It was here that he became involved with the underground economy, first as a trusted enforcer for a dominant local boss, and later as a boss in his own right. His rise was not easy. There were fights, betrayals, and alliances so volatile that death often hovered nearby. In the 1930s, he became deeply involved with the leader of the illegal gambling world in Harlem, a woman known as the Queen of Numbers. Under her wing, he learned not just to survive, but to command. Together they confronted rival bosses who wanted control of the city's lucrative rackets. The turf wars that followed weren't small skirmishes. They were battles that sparked dozens of murders and plotted multiple kidnappings. These were not abstract dangers. These were violent realities that shaped the very streets he walked. Eventually, after the dust settled from those conflicts, he didn't fade away. Instead, he forged a controversial alliance with powerful figures outside of his own community, including key members of the Italian mafia, that allowed him to expand his reach and influence. Through this network, he positioned himself as the undisputed crime leader in Harlem, a man whose decisions could ripple through the neighborhood and beyond. His name became synonymous with control, strategy and ruthless decision-making, but here's what most people don't realize. Along with the fear and respect he inspired came a vulnerability that no amount of influence could erase. As he climbed higher in the world of crime, his family became exposed to the same dangers he once only faced himself. The enemies he made, the rivalries he fought, and the deals he struck were all part of a world where people learned early to exploit weaknesses. A crime boss's family is never shielded simply because of his power. Often, they become targets because of it. His reputation was double-edged. On one side, he was a leader, a strategist, and someone capable of navigating the most dangerous alleys of organized crime. On the other, he was a man whose personal life existed in the same world where retribution, threats and violence were everyday currency. People didn't just fear him, they watched his moves, waited for openings, and understood that striking at his loved ones could provoke the most extreme reactions. That's why the moment his daughter was taken was far more than a random crime. This was a strike at a man whose influence ran deep, whose name could silence crowds, and whose wrath could reshape the direction of the streets. In a world built on power and peril, nothing was ever safe, not even his family. Before we talk about the moment that changed everything, we need to step into the streets where it all took place, a place that was as beautiful in its culture as it was brutal in its reality. Harlem wasn't just another neighborhood in New York City. It was a vibrant hub of black culture, music and spirit, but underneath that rhythm of jazz and art beat a heart of rough survival. Behind the Renaissance and spirited nightlife were dark alleys and broken promises, where illegal gambling, robbery, and violence weren't rare events but everyday realities. By the early 20th century, Harlem had become a center for organized crime and street gangs, where policy rackets and numbers games flourished, and illegal activity touched nearly every block. In those decades, gang presence wasn't an underground fringe, it was woven into the very fabric of the streets. Criminal syndicates controlled drug distribution and extortion, and street crews fought over territory with little fear of law enforcement, because police corruption was so widespread that many officers were on the take. Wikipedia One rival crews and organized groups didn't hesitate to use violence to send messages. In some eras even kidnapping or murder was part of routine retaliation or attempt to shake down rivals. The atmosphere in Harlem was a powder keg. Any spark could ignite confrontation, and the strongest players lived by a code that was far removed from the law. Being connected to a figure with real power in this environment changed everything. Aligning with a major street boss gave someone protection, influence and respect that extended beyond the usual boundaries of neighborhood life. People didn't just look the other way, they acted when someone associated with power walked by. A strong connection meant you could move through rival areas, collect debts, broker deals, and survive where others would be picked off. But it also made you conspicuous, visible in a world where neutrality rarely existed. Your enemies knew who you were linked to, and that knowledge became a tool in their hands. For those who walked with someone known across the borough, life had a unique currency. You weren't merely surviving the streets, you were part of the hierarchy that controlled them. Allies stood ready to assist, doors opened where they were otherwise locked. A powerful association could keep you safe from petty criminal threats, but it also painted a target on your back whenever danger brewed. People watched, waited and sometimes waited to strike exactly because of that connection. Harlem's environment during this time was a collision of elite culture and desperate survival. On one corner, musicians and poets drew crowds that included the city's elite. On the next, rival crews eyed each other with guns tucked under jackets. Violence was fluid, and lines between friend and foe were often drawn hastily by who walked into a bar, who collected on a debt, or who tried to expand territory. Being tied to someone with real criminal influence gave you a certain kind of strength in this world, but it also meant living under scrutiny, where every step was watched, and every weakness was a possible opening for someone ready to test you. Before we talk about the event that would shock an entire neighborhood, we need to meet the people at the heart of this story. His children. He had daughters who grew up in a world most could never imagine. They weren't just ordinary kids, they were the children of a man whose name carried weight on every corner, whose reputation could command fear and respect in equal measure. Among them, one daughter stands out, Ruthie. Her life would soon intersect with danger in a way that highlighted both the risks and the responsibilities of being part of this family. Ruthie, like her sisters, grew up in the shadows of power. From a young age she understood that her father's world wasn't a game. Streets that seemed lively and vibrant during the day could turn treacherous at night, and people who smiled at you in daylight could become threats under cover of darkness. Growing up with a father like him meant learning early to read situations, to sense danger, and to navigate the unspoken rules of survival. Even daily routines weren't simple. A trip to a store or a walk in the neighborhood carried an undercurrent of risk that other children would never know. Despite the peril, Ruthie experienced her childhood with the love and protection her father could provide. He was a man of contradictions, feared in the streets, yet fiercely devoted to his family. His daughters were shielded as much as possible, taught to understand the power their father wielded while also being aware that that very power could attract unwanted attention. In many ways, his children lived in two worlds at once, the innocent joys of childhood, and the dangerous realities of their father's empire. Ruthie, in particular, had a curious spirit. She was bright, alert, and unafraid to explore the world around her, qualities that would later put her at the center of a story no one would forget. She embodied both the innocence of youth and the sharp instincts of someone who had grown up watching her father navigate peril at every turn. While she played and laughed like any other child, she also carried an understanding that her safety depended on more than just luck. It depended on the people she trusted and the decisions her father made. Her sisters also played roles in this life under the shadow of a famous father. Together they formed a tight-knit family, aware that the outside world saw them through the lens of their father's fame and influence. Every encounter with strangers, every new person they met, carried the weight of potential danger. Growing up in that environment wasn't easy, but it forged resilience and an instinct for survival that would be crucial in the days to come. Understanding the world Ruthie and her sisters grew up in helps explain why the later incident was so significant. It wasn't just a random act of violence, it was a direct strike at a family living under constant scrutiny, a family whose safety was always at the mercy of the streets. The lessons they learned, the instincts they developed, and the watchfulness they carried would all play a role when that fateful day arrived. Before we talk about the moment that would ignite fear and chaos, we need to picture the day Ruthie was taken. It started like any other day in the neighborhood, with ordinary sounds of life, footsteps on the sidewalks, distant voices, the rhythm of a city that never truly sleeps. But in the blink of an eye, the ordinary turned into terror. Three men appeared, moving with precision and purpose. They were not strangers who acted on impulse. They were deliberate, calculating, and fully aware of who they were targeting. Their eyes were fixed on Ruthie, and their intentions were clear. Without warning, they grabbed her. There was no hesitation, no room for resistance. Ruthie, caught off guard, struggled and shouted, but the men were stronger, moving quickly and with a coordination that suggested planning. They dragged her from the safety of her environment into an unknown space, a world she had never seen before. The streets she had walked 1,000 times, where she felt the invisible shield of her father's influence, suddenly felt exposed. Every step they took was a calculated risk, one that could change the life of a young girl and set in motion a chain of events that no one could have predicted. The kidnappers believed they were clever. They assumed that by taking Ruthie, they could leverage her as a bargaining tool. They imagined they could pressure her father, disrupt his plans, and perhaps even force him into a corner. In their minds, this was a calculated strike, a way to test the limits of his power. They didn't fully grasp the man they were challenging, nor the fierce loyalty that would drive him to act with urgency and precision. But in that moment, they held the illusion of control, thinking the child's fear could be turned into leverage against a man who had never known defeat easily. As Ruthie was dragged away, the neighborhood seemed to freeze. Bystanders watched, shocked, unsure whether to intervene. Some feared the men, some didn't want to get involved, and others were paralyzed by the audacity of the act. The kidnappers moved with speed and determination, leaving behind the ordinary routines of the street and dragging Ruthie into uncertainty. The psychological impact was immediate. The sense of safety that the streets had offered, even under her father's shadow, vanished in an instant, Every movement of the abductors suggested calculation. They didn't act recklessly. They moved like men who had considered their approach, their escape, and the impression of power they could project. To them this wasn't just a crime, it was a message. They believed that by taking Ruthie, they could strike fear, manipulate decisions, and assert dominance in a world where her father's name carried immense influence. But what they didn't anticipate was that their act would spark a response far greater than they had imagined, one that would test both the limits of their courage and the extent of their opponent's reach. Ruthie's abduction was a defining moment. It wasn't just an act of violence, it was a deliberate attempt to disrupt a family, to test the boundaries of power, and to challenge a man whose reputation alone had kept rivals in line for decades. That day, fear collided with strategy, innocence met danger, and a calculated strike against a powerful figure set in motion a story that would be remembered long after the streets returned to their normal rhythm. Before we talk about how the neighborhood reacted, we need to understand just how quickly the news of the kidnapping traveled. In a community like Harlem, where everyone knew each other and information moved faster than the police could respond, word of an extraordinary event spread almost instantly. By the time anyone fully realized what had happened, nearly the entire block, and then the surrounding streets had heard whispers of the shocking act. It wasn't a simple rumor, it was a story that carried weight, because the girl taken was the daughter of a man whose name alone commanded fear and respect. People talked in doorways, in shops and on stoops. Mothers warned their children, neighbors exchanged anxious glances, and friends hurried to find out what had occurred. Every telling carried more urgency than the last, until the whole area seemed gripped by a tense energy. The fact that it was not an ordinary crime made it even more gripping. A child had been taken, yes, but this wasn't just a random act. The choice of target, the way it was carried out, and the identity of the girl made it clear that this kidnapping had purpose and intention. Curiosity mixed with fear. People wanted to know exactly what had happened, who had done it, and whether it was safe to go about their daily lives. They speculated about motives and outcomes, imagining scenarios both terrifying and unlikely. Was this an attempt to send a message, a way to challenge power, or was it something more personal, a calculated strike meant to provoke a reaction? The ambiguity heightened tension, because in Harlem's streets, even a small spark could ignite a major confrontation. The spread of information also revealed the interconnectedness of the community. People passed details along, not always accurately, but the essence of the story remained. Neighbors shared what they had seen, friends confirmed what they had heard, and soon the tale of the girl's abduction became a part of daily conversation. The streets, usually filled with laughter, music and life, now carried an undercurrent of anxiety. Everyone felt the weight of the act, because they understood that when someone of influence was targeted, the repercussions could ripple far beyond the immediate family. At the same time, there was a sense of awe at the audacity of the act. People recognized the danger inherent in challenging someone so powerful, and that recognition made the story more compelling. Witnessing or hearing about such a bold move, in broad daylight no less, stirred emotions ranging from fear to disbelief. Even those who had never met the girl or her family felt the tension, because in a place like Harlem, the balance of power affected everyone. In essence, the news of the kidnapping didn't just inform people, it gripped them. It forced them to acknowledge the dangers hidden in plain sight, to confront the reality of power and vulnerability, and to understand that some crimes carry consequences far beyond the immediate act. In a world where respect, influence and survival were constantly in play, this event reminded everyone that nothing in the streets was ever ordinary, and that the reverberations of a single action could be felt by the entire community. Before we talk about how the search for his daughter unfolded, it's important to understand the mindset of the man at the center of it all. When the news of Ruthie's kidnapping reached him, panic was not an option, nor was hesitation. He had lived a life defined by danger, betrayal and constant challenges to his authority. From early on, he had learned that moments of crisis required clarity, not fear. Every second wasted could cost lives, and in his world inaction was often more dangerous than confrontation. Biography immediately shifted into action mode, assessing the situation with the precision of someone who had navigated countless threats before. His mind raced through possibilities, analyzing where the men could have taken Ruthie and what their motives might be. This wasn't reckless decision-making. It was a controlled, methodical response fueled by experience. He understood that the streets of Harlem operated by unspoken rules, and those who tried to exploit weakness often underestimated the consequences. Bumpy's reputation alone worked as a kind of tool in the search. His name was known far and wide, whispered in corners and across blocks. People who might have stayed silent in another situation felt compelled to act, either out of loyalty, fear, or the desire to align with someone whose reach extended across the city. Connections he had built over decades, alliances with community figures, former associates, and even rival factions, allowed him to gather information quickly. Where others would rely on police reports or slow investigations, he had networks that operated in real time, capable of finding clues before the kidnappers could disappear into the shadows. His approach was deliberate. He didn't storm the streets blindly. He moved strategically, leveraging his contacts and the reputation he had cultivated to extract information. Each lead was treated with care, each potential sighting evaluated against the knowledge of his trusted people. In a city where danger lurked in every corner, these connections were more than social ties. They were a lifeline. They allowed him to operate with a level of precision most people could never imagine, turning panic into action and uncertainty into opportunity. The combination of fearlessness and networked power made him uniquely capable of responding to the crisis. While others might have been paralyzed by worry or speculation, he had the tools and the understanding of his environment to act decisively. He knew the streets, the alleys, and even the patterns of those who might challenge him. Every piece of information was valuable, and he used it to narrow the search, anticipate the kidnappers' moves, and predict where Ruthie could be. By moving quickly and confidently, he set the tone for everyone involved. Allies, neighbors, and even potential informants understood that hesitation was not an option. His calm determination combined with his reach and influence turned what could have been a hopeless situation into a coordinated effort. In those first critical hours, he demonstrated exactly why his reputation had been built not just on fear, but on skill, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to protect his own. This was a man who had faced countless challenges, but none so personal. The urgency of the moment revealed the depth of his strategy, the extent of his influence, and the lengths he would go to ensure his family's safety. Every decision, every call, every movement was calculated, not out of emotion but out of necessity. It was a masterclass in using power, knowledge, and reputation to confront danger head-on. In the end, the story isn't just about a kidnapping, or even about a man who ruled the streets of Harlem. It's about family, the lengths we will go to protect the ones we love. It's about power, how influence can be both a shield and a target. It's about fear, and how the right kind of courage can turn even the darkest moment into action. And above all, it's about survival in a world where rules are scarce, and danger can appear without warning. Every decision, every connection, every calculated move mattered, showing us that in life, strength isn't just measured by what you take on, but by who you protect and how you respond when everything is at stake. Remember, moments like these remind us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it. And in that truth lies a lesson that extends far beyond any street, any city, or any time. It's a reminder that family, loyalty, and resolve can shape destinies, even when the world seems completely out of control. If you found this story powerful, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story that dives deep into the extraordinary lives and lessons hidden in history.